Rabbi Weissman, I'm very sorry for the delay, but this was important, and part of it is, in fact, what you're probably going to be talking about as well. I have read your 31 points why you're not going to get vaccinated, by the way.
Okay, great. Well, there are actually many more. I wrote that about 10 weeks ago, and as time goes on, there are only more and more reasons to not take their vaccines.
Whoa. Can you tell our viewers who you are and what you're doing? You're in Israel, right?
Correct. I moved to Israel from the U.S. about 13 years ago. I'm an Orthodox rabbi. I love Israel with all my heart and soul. I love the people of Israel. I'm a passionate, one of those Zionist people. I really love Israel. But at the same time, it's to my great shame and horror to see the way the government of Israel, really not the people of Israel, but it's the government, it's the people in charge, have turned against their own people, as we've seen in many parts of the world. And we see history repeating itself. Unfortunately, all the people who said that, Israel was started to prevent a Holocaust from happening and the Jews could find a safe refuge in Israel, unfortunately, that's not the case. It's not the case. And we are in very great danger here. And all of the human race is in great danger because this tyranny is happening everywhere.
I'll briefly translate this. Herr Weissmann ist vor 13 Jahren aus den USA nach Israel ausgewandert. Er ist orthodoxer Jude, er liebt das Land und muss jetzt zu seinem Erschrecken feststellen, dass die Regierung, so wie in vielen anderen Ländern auch, sich gegen die eigenen Menschen, gegen die eigenen Einwohner richtet mit ihrem Handeln. Er sagt, die Geschichte wiederholt sich. This is something that Rabbi Smith from New Jersey, whom we interviewed here, this is something that Vera Sharaf, who we interviewed, that's what everyone who we interviewed from Israel or anyone who is of the Jewish faith has reminded us of, that these parallels, history is repeating itself, these parallels must not be overlooked.
That's correct. Look, King Solomon taught us, he was the wisest of all men, according to Judaism. He taught us there is nothing new under the sun. History always repeats itself, and that's why we have a Torah that's written, and that's why we have history. It's there so we can learn to hopefully finally get things right. We've seen this television show over and over again. The actors change, the lines change a little bit, but the plot is always the same. Yeah. And it's time we finally, as both the Jewish people and the human race, we finally get things right.
Mm-hmm. How do people manage in Israel? We're getting all kinds of information that tells us that people feel like they're under extreme pressure, much more so than in most other countries. How do you see that?
Well, I'll be very blunt with you. The government of Israel is literally forcing people to vaccinate. Now, forcing doesn't mean that they're breaking down people's doors and holding them down and jabbing needles in their arms, although there are some people in the government who did express dreams and fantasies of maybe doing such things. They're not doing that, but there are many ways to force people. You can force people by socially isolating them. You can force them by having them lose their jobs and livelihoods. You can force them by not being able to go to school. Your children can't go to school. Your life basically stops, that you're shunned from public life. That is a form, of course, of torture and forcing people. And that is what's going on. And the government of Israel is being very, very aggressive to force people in various ways, and they're barely even hiding it anymore.
Why do you think that is happening? What is wrong with the government? Are they part of the other side, or are they just confused? Oh, okay.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Look, Israel, the modern state of Israel, has been around for approximately 70 years, and the politicians in parliament have never been able to agree on anything. I mean, you have Jews, you have Arabs, right-wing, left-wing, religious Jews, not religious Jews, anti-religious Jews, everything under the sun. And they all hate each other, and they argue about everything. But for the first time in the history of modern Israel, every person in the government agrees on one thing, that we don't have basic human rights, we don't have medical autonomy, and it is virtuous to force people to vaccinate. Somehow they've all gotten together on the same page on this one issue, that we don't have human rights anymore.
That's extremely important. Let me translate this. Also ich habe ihn gefragt, wie sieht es denn da aus in Israel? Es sind hier viele Meldungen eingegangen bei uns von Israelis und von Menschen, die jüdisch sind, die sagen, hier ist es absolut grauenvoll. Er bestätigt, dass tatsächlich dass tatsächlich die Regierung alles tut. Ich hatte extra noch gefragt, gehören die etwa zur anderen Seite? Da sagt er, ja, die gehören zur anderen Seite. Die Regierung, die sich sonst noch niemals auf irgendetwas verständigen konnte in den letzten 70 Jahren, hat sich ganz plötzlich mit den unterschiedlichen Fraktionen, die es da gibt, die einen sind gläubig, die anderen sind nicht gläubig, hat sich ganz plötzlich darauf geeinigt, dass es keine Menschenrechte mehr gibt und dass es okay ist, Menschen zu zwingen, sich impfen zu lassen. Incredible. Incredible. Why do you think this is happening?
All of them have sold out. I mean, Israel's government signed a deal with Pfizer. I'm sure everybody knows this already. Most of the contract has been blacked out. The key parts have been blacked out. Obviously, they're hiding all of the good news that would make everybody very proud and feel safe. Those are the parts that they blacked out, of course. So they've all signed out with Pfizer. I think it's fair to assume that they obligated themselves to vaccinate as many people as possible, possibly everybody, even children, and the government is not working for us. And this is true of the governments all over the world. They're not working for the people. They're working for the wealthy people, the corporations, you know, the people who are pulling their strings. They're not working for the common man. They don't care about our lives. They don't care about our health. They don't care about us at all. They only care about their own interests. So it's some kind of a blend of money, power, and evil, which may vary from government to government and person to person, but that's really what it all boils down to. It's money, power, and evil.
Ich habe gefragt, warum ist das so? Wieso kommt das, dass sich plötzlich alle auf diese wirklich bösartige Weise geeinigt haben? Er sagt, die haben komplett ausverkauft und das sei nicht auf Israel beschränkt, sondern das sei wohl wahr für die allermeisten Regierungen. Ein echter Sellout hat stattgefunden. Und zwar sagt er, dass diese Mischung, auch diese Mischung, von der er jetzt gerade gesprochen hat, nämlich eine Mischung aus Geld, Macht und Bösem, dass diese Mischung wohl überall auf der Welt dieselbe sei. But you're pretty sure that this is in fact what's going on in Israel. I mean, this is what we have been assuming because there's so many concrete evidence that points in that direction. But we of course we're not completely sure because we don't have the contracts that actually spell this out. But there must be some kind of agreement.
There is no doubt in my mind, there's no way to rationalize this. There's no way to justify hiding this information from the public, having these secret deals, lying through their teeth to the public. They've told so many obvious lies. I'm not a scientist. I don't have a medical background, although I've learned a lot over the last year. And any intelligent person who spends some time can learn at least the main issues. You know, the government of Israel officially says there were 0 cases of flu in the last year. Somehow the flu vanished from Israel. And the official reason they give is that people are wearing masks. Now, that is obviously crazy because some people are not wearing masks. Nobody's wearing masks all the time. If they said that because of lockdowns and mask wearing, there are 10% or 20% fewer cases of flu, that would be plausible. But if they say there were literally 0 cases, not one single case of flu, they're obviously lying. You don't need to be a genius or a medical expert to know that they're lying. So if they're already lying about this, then you have to assume they're lying about many other things as well. Even in Judaism, the Torah says that if a person is caught being a liar, he is disqualified to testify in court anymore. We don't assume that he'll be telling the truth the next time either. So any official numbers that you get from the government of Israel about the virus or about the vaccine or any of these numbers, we have to assume that they are lying because they've already proven themselves to be liars.
Rabbi Weissmann sagt, dass er keinerlei Zweifel daran hat, dass seine Einschätzung, die den Informationen entspricht, die wir auch immer mehr bekommen, dass seine Einschätzung absolut korrekt ist, dass also diese Mischung aus Geld, Macht und Bösem dazu geführt hat, dass sich alle Leute in den oberen Rängen der Regierung geeinigt haben darauf, dass die Menschenrechte nicht mehr gelten und dass die Menschen gezwungen werden können, geimpft zu werden. Er sagt, er hat da überhaupt keinen Zweifel dran, weil er sei zwar kein Mediziner, aber es sei ja offensichtlich, dass man belogen wird, zumindest in einigen Teilen belogen wird. Zum Beispiel, dass plötzlich überhaupt keine Grippefälle mehr vorhanden sein sollen, dass überhaupt keine Grippefälle mehr vorhanden sein sollen, und zwar angeblich wegen der Masken. Das kann auch er als Nichtmediziner beurteilen, dass das ganz offensichtlich ist. Und er sagt, wenn Sie schon über einen Punkt lügen, er hat sicherlich noch viele mehr, ich habe ja seine Thesen gelesen, wenn Sie schon über diesen einen Punkt lügen, dann sagt die Tora den Juden, Im Effekt, wer einmal lügt, dem glaubt man nicht. Also wer einmal mit einer Lüge erwischt worden ist, der kann nicht mehr vor Gericht aussagen, zum Beispiel. Und darauf basiert sein Verständnis dieser Situation. And I think this is to realize and to understand this is extremely important, because if people don't understand this, they're just going to go ahead and they're going to follow orders. So what do you think? Are we coming closer to a tipping point or a turning point in Israel? Because we feel that in parts of the world, this tipping point is within reach. Not in close reach, but it is within reach, because the other side is getting extremely nervous and making many, many mistakes.
Well, I think the tipping point is definitely getting close. At this point, you can basically split the population into two groups of people: those who still have their minds turned on and have a conscience and can think clearly, and those who don't, those who fear God and those who don't. That's really what it boils down to. I think everybody who is open to facts and reason have already chosen their side. And the people that are not open to that, if I show them the next study that comes out, the next bit of data that comes out, or make a logical argument, they're just going to brush it all aside. Mm-hmm. I think everybody's pretty much chosen their sides at this point, and now things are going to have to play out. There's really a war that's going on. We are the evil ones. We are the ones that don't want to get injected with some crazy drug that we don't need, and we are being, the lesser people. We're not really humans anymore. We are murderers, ticking time bombs, walking around making everybody else sick. And the government is basically that's the way they're trying to paint us in other people's eyes. So there's only two ways that this can turn out. Either we're going to win or we're going to lose. Either truth is going to win out or terrible things are going to happen. There's no middle ground anymore.
Yeah.
So what's the percentage, would you think, that of the people who are, who bought the official narrative and the other ones?
Well, I was at a meeting last night of activists, and somebody said that approximately 50% did not get the vaccine yet. Now, that's including the total population, including children. Now, Israel is now trying to vaccinate. They were recently only vaccinating up to the age of 16 and up, and now they want to lower that to, I think, 12 to 15 also, which is child abuse. It's mass child abuse. They're trying to lower it to even the children, because most of the people who didn't get vaccinated at this point are probably the children, probably the youngest segments of the population.
And then one more question. So with the side effects, from the vaccinations and all that, do you think that the people who are in charge kind of play? I mean, I assume they're not getting the vaccine themselves, because
I wouldn't think for 1 minute that they are. They could take pictures of themselves smiling, putting some needle near their arm, in their arm. Who knows what's in that arm? I think that they wouldn't be crazy enough to take this.
Yeah. So, but then I assume they would also not have it administered to their buddies, their friends, or their family. So there must be like a crowd of people who are basically not in that game and maybe get like false vaccination passports or something like that. I mean, do you think they're preparing for like that a certain amount of people just stays without the vaccination? I mean, their crowd,
probably so. Whoever is the elite crowd, the rich, powerful, wealthy in crowd, they're probably trying to save them. The rest of the population are guinea pigs for Pfizer.
Yeah, that's what we think too. Are people even aware of this stunning fact that BioNTech Pfizer is partly German, and that this so-called drug, which of course is an experimental gene therapy, that this is German? Are they even aware of this?
Many people are, but the media spins it. The media doesn't tell people the truth. The media is basically a propaganda arm of the government at this point. All they are is basically selling drugs these days. But the media, they do report with great pride that Pfizer has Jewish people involved with it, Jewish people pushing the vaccine. Say, look, the Jews are saving the world. The Jews are coming out with this wonder drug, and they're saving lives, and we're so proud of it. That's how the media spins it.
They're not just Germans; they're Jewish.
Jewish. Well, there are Germans as part of Pfizer. Yes, there are Germans. Germans and Jews. Yes. So the media spins it that way.
Do you see a way out of this? I mean, as far as we're concerned, as lawyers, we believe that the only way out of this is by having the international legal community cooperate. Maybe setting up, we're just debating this, and I think we're going to start working on this very soon, maybe setting up a Nuremberg type of international tribunal. But apart from the legal efforts that are definitely necessary, I think much more transparency, much more education of the public has to happen without being too confrontative, because if we become aggressive, that's just what the other side wants, because as you explained, they're splitting the population here in the United States is probably 50-50 maybe. Here in Germany, it may be 20 or 30% on our side who are critical, and 60-70% who are completely in line with the government. Well, not completely. Some of them are beginning to have doubts. How do you assess the situation in Israel?
So there are lawyers who are very bravely trying to go through the legal system. The problem is that they're being blocked at every turn because the judges are also corrupt. The legal system is also corrupt. They're all in on it. They're not doing us any favors. So we have to do anything that we're able to do. I see us as all soldiers fighting in an army, and we have to figure out our own personal missions using our skills and talents. But we have to realize at the same time that through natural means, there is no way out of this. Only God can save us. And this is one of the articles I wrote, is that this is actually a war against God. What the people in charge and power are doing, they are fighting against God. They want to know everything and own everything and can control everything and be in charge of who lives and who dies and whose job is essential and whose life is essential. They want to be God. They are at a war against God. Now, the good thing is that God always wins. Now, how long this is going to go until God intervenes and brings justice to them, that I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. And how bad it's going to get, I don't know. But at the end of the day, we are going to win because we are on God's side. And God can save us. And these people have no power. God has all the power over everything. So we have to do the things that we can do to inform people and strengthen ourselves and strengthen other people and try to spread the truth. But ultimately, the bad guys have all the power. They have all the money. They have all the weapons. And we can't fight them through natural means. Only God can save us.
Okay. Also, ja, Wolfgang, du wolltest was sagen. We have, we have Dr. Wolfgang Wodak, who's also on this Zoom, and I thought he wanted to ask something, but I'll quickly translate this because this is really important. Sagt, wir kommen hier wahrscheinlich schon an einen Tipping Point. Warte mal. An einen Tipping Point. Allerdings glaubt er nicht, dass unsere Seite ausgestattet ist mit genug, wie soll man sagen, Waffen in Form von rechtlichen Möglichkeiten, Geld und so weiter. Die andere Seite hat offensichtlich schon seit Jahrzehnten, vielleicht seit Jahrhunderten dafür gesorgt, dass alle strategisch wichtigen Stellen besetzt sind. Auch das Rechtssystem sagt, er ist komplett korrupt in Israel. Dies ist ein Krieg, der inzwischen stattfindet, sagt er, zwischen uns auf der einen Seite, in Deutschland vielleicht 20%, 30%, in anderen Teilen der Welt, in den USA 50-50 auf der einen Seite und denjenigen auf der anderen Seite, die uns versuchen zu Feinden zu erklären, damit wir aufeinander losgehen. In Israel sagt er, 50% sind noch nicht geimpft. Inzwischen beginnt man aber damit auch das waren die über 60-Jährigen, beginnt man aber damit auch daran zu denken, Kinder zu impfen. Das ist aus seiner Sicht Kindesmisshandlung. Ich halte das sogar für noch schlimmer. Der Punkt, der auch bei uns, so wie überall auf der Welt, der wichtigste ist wohl, dass die Medien völlig unter Kontrolle oder in gemeinsamer Kooperation mit den jeweiligen Regierungen sind. Ja, dass das Rechtssystem korrupt ist, sagt er, jeder muss seine eigene Sache machen. Am Ende, so sagt er, als religiöser orthodoxer Jude, wird uns nur Gott helfen können, weil Gott immer gewinnt. Das Gute setzt sich am Ende durch. Und deswegen kann er auch nicht sagen, wie nah wir diesem Tipping Point schon sind und wie lange das noch dauert. Er sieht nur, dass das Ende so ist. You know, when you're talking about how they're now trying to discuss, and this is something that Professor Schwab told us about, that there's a new decision by the European Court of Human Rights saying it's absolutely okay for countries, for nations to mandate vaccinations. This is something that's very, very disturbing. And if this concerns children, and I think that decision did concern children, then we're talking about not just child abuse. This comes really close to ritual child abuse. And this, I think, is a stark warning for everyone. That's why last night when we discussed a new international class action that's going to be filed in Canada for only children, that's why we think that this is important. We have to have people focus on what is going on, in particular with respect to our children. I think, and we think, this could be a turning point if we manage to draw people's attention to what this means, in particular for children. But as you're saying, this is a very spiritual or religious assessment of the situation. You're saying only God can save us. Is there something that people can do to help?
Well, in terms of the God aspect, people have to try to do good deeds, and they have to pray, and they have to try to help each other. That's really the only thing that we can do. We have to do the natural things that are available to us. When people are in danger, they have to take normal precautions to protect themselves from danger, but the outcome is not in their hands. We don't have control over any outcomes in this world. Only God does. We have to do what we're able to do, but we have to put all of our faith and trust in God. I just want to bring up one point about what you said a moment ago about the legal challenges now facing children, that the human rights frauds are claiming that we essentially don't have human rights. In the U.S. and many parts of the country, they're now ruling that children have the capability and the power and the rights to change their gender if they so wish, to take drugs that will basically castrate them, because children are old enough and wise enough to have that right to make that choice. And yet at the same time, these human rights, quote unquote, organizations and courts are now ruling that children don't have the right to say, I don't want this drug in my body. I don't want this vaccine in my body. So it's kind of strange how they decide what rights children have and what rights children don't have when it comes to putting drugs in their body.
Well, as we have heard from some of the psychiatrists and psychologists whom we interviewed, this may be part of their psychological warfare operation, trying to confuse people, trying to disorient them so that eventually everyone is simply going to go ahead and say, oh, what the hell, I'm just going to follow their orders. That's part of the plan, we believe.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all. It makes life much easier for them than having police and soldiers breaking down people's doors. If people will willingly line up to get vaccinated, it makes everybody's life easier, doesn't it?
Ja, also er sagt, als ich gefragt habe, ja, was, wenn am Ende doch ohnehin nur eine spirituelle oder religiöse Lösung möglich ist, weil Gott eben immer am Ende gewinnt, was kann dann der Einzelne tun? Er sagt, ja, das ist das, was man eben immer tut, gute Taten, die normalen Vorsichtsmaßnahmen ergreifen, die man immer ergreift, wenn Gefahr droht, und beten, das sind so seine Vorstellungen, seine Vorschläge, das kann man machen, aber er sieht natürlich gleichzeitig im Blick auf die USA, dass das Verhalten der Herrschenden in Anführungsstrichen völlig widersprüchlich ist. Inzwischen kann da in den USA nach den dortigen Gesetzen können Kinder sich entschließen, dass sie doch nicht lieber diesem Geschlecht, sondern einem anderen Geschlecht angehören wollen, während gleichzeitig aber Impfpflichten diskutiert werden, sodass dieselben Kinder dann sich auf keinen Fall mehr gegen Impfungen wehren können. What do you think is the ultimate goal of the other side? What are they trying to achieve? Because many people are realizing that this has never been about health, and some people who are beginning to ask questions are getting closer to that conclusion as well. What is the ultimate goal? As I mentioned earlier,
they're fighting a war against God. They want to displace God. They want to own the world and control the world and everything that's in it. That's their ultimate goal.
Also die andere Seite, sagt er, ist offenbar vollkommen größenwahnsinnig, dass sie wollen sozusagen Gott ersetzen oder sie an die Stelle von Gott setzen und die komplette Kontrolle über die Welt bekommen. Das ist das, was die Menschen verstehen müssen. Und das ist das, was am Ende droht, wenn wir uns nicht dafür einsetzen, dass es eben nicht passiert. That's pretty disturbing. Pretty disturbing.
Well, it's not that disturbing. It's actually very good news, because on the positive side of things, it's really waking people up to see all the false idols in our time. People putting their blind trust in governments, in armies, in morals, in courts, in human rights. all the scientists and doctors, people put their blind faith in all of these things when they really should be putting their faith in God. So it's waking people up to the fact that there is no other option. Either we're serving God or we are serving some form of idolatry. Mm-hmm. You know, whether it's in the form of people in white coats and needles and science, we're either serving God or we're serving idols. And that's a very positive thing, because people need to wake up and realize that we don't have any power, and as bright and as bright and advanced and as enlightened as we think we are, we're really no different than the people who lived thousands of years ago who also worshiped death cults. We're really not that different today. We just have fancier toys to play with. Mm-hmm. That's all. And on the other hand, and the other positive aspect of it is that being that this is a war against God and they're trying to take over his business, God doesn't want to give up his business. God loves the world. He loves the people in it, and he's not going to let people take over his business. So the story has a positive ending to it.
Great. Also ich habe gesagt, ja, also wenn das so ist, dann klingt das ja ganz schön böse. Da gibt's ja schlichtweg keinen Ausweg. Sagt er, nee, die gute Seite ist, dass die Menschen das verstehen, langsam aber sicher, dass offenbar das Tuch zur Seite gezogen wird, sodass wir sehen können, dass die Wahl nur noch darin besteht, eigentlich immer schon darin bestanden hat, sich für das Gute, er sagt, für Gott zu entscheiden oder aber für falsche Idole. Das sei auch nichts Neues, das haben wir schon seit 1000 Jahren so gehabt. Nur ist es jetzt das erste Mal wohl so, dass das offensichtlich wird, dass wir uns offensichtlich entscheiden müssen zwischen dem guten Gott oder den bösen Idolen, also denjenigen, die mit weißen Kitteln und Spritzen hinter uns herjagen. Wer da freiwillig mitmacht, der wird vermutlich untergehen. So you do expect, however, that quite a few people will not survive this, right?
Yes, I expect that. Look, there's a prophecy that we have, and a lot of our prophecies are cryptic, and we don't really understand exactly how they play out until in hindsight. But there is one prophecy that says that in the end of days, and that's the period in which we are living now, approximately 2/3 of the world population is going to die between plagues and wars. I think the plague is not the virus per se, because that's really nothing more than a flu according to the actual numbers, but really due to these quote unquote vaccines that are going to be slowly killing people, and the wars. Eventually, I think all hell is going to break loose, and there are going to be massive wars. So there is most likely, there's going to be a lot of death and destruction, although who really knows? If people turn to God and they repent and they do good deeds, things can change. I mean, we do have a principle in Judaism that when God makes a promise to do something good, then he never goes back on it, even if the people sin. But if God threatens the people with punishment, then that prophecy does not have to come true, because the people can change their ways and then the punishment can be changed. So even though it's written, that negative thing doesn't have to happen. Things can change.
Also, er sagt, die schlechte Nachricht ist natürlich, dass diese Versuche unternommen werden, Gott zu spielen. Das sind ja größenwahnsinnige Fantasien, mit denen wir es zu tun haben auf der anderen Seite. Sie wollen also ihm sozusagen das Geschäft kaputt machen. Er sagt, aber die gute Nachricht ist, Gott lässt sich sein Geschäft nicht kaputt machen. Die Frage, wie das Ganze endet, sei zwar offen, aber er bezieht sich auf eine Prophezeiung, sagt, das Schwierige bei Prophezeiungen ist, dass man immer erst hinterher feststellen kann, ob sie richtig waren oder nicht. Aber da gibt es so eine Endzeitprophezeiung, wonach hier durch die Plagen, also durch das Virus, wobei er das nicht wörtlich meint, weil er sagt, das Virus ist ja nicht gefährlicher als eine normale Grippe, dass durch die Plagen, durch das Virus und durch Kriege 2/3 der Menschheit ausgelöscht werden, bevor das Ganze vorbei ist. Aber, sagt er, das ist nicht in Stein gemeißelt, das kann auch ganz anders kommen, wenn wir also in der Lage sind, dadurch, dass wir Gutes tun, dadurch, dass wir das Richtige tun, das Ruder rumzureißen und sozusagen das Gute oder Gott auf unserer Seite zu haben, dann kann sich das Ganze auch sehr schnell ändern und dann kann es eben sein, dass es eben vorher gestoppt wird. So it is possible in your view that if we do decide not to follow these false idols, but to do good things, to believe in God, that things can change from one day to the next.
Absolutely. Things can change in an instant. God is watching everything. I mean, we have to realize that the same God who was around thousands of years ago is still here today. He's just as active. He's just as powerful. God doesn't change. We change, but God doesn't change. He's here. He's watching everything. He knows everything. He's keeping track of who's on his side and who isn't on his side. And every ounce of suffering that the bad people are inflicting on their people, they're going to have to pay for it. Every drop of blood that they're spilling, Every fear and panic and pain that they're causing on the human race, they're going to pay for it. And on the flip side, all of the good deeds that we do, all of the little efforts that we do to try to help people that don't seem to be going anywhere, that we try really hard, we put our heart and soul into something and it doesn't seem to make a difference, it makes a difference. Everything matters. Everything that we do matters. God is keeping track of everything. If the bad guys know everything they do, they know where people are at all times and what they're doing and what they're buying and what they're thinking, God certainly knows everything, and he's keeping track of everything as well. So if we're on God's side and we're fighting for God, then we can count on God to fight for us as well.
Okay. Wolfgang, du wolltest was sagen, bevor ich das jetzt... Nee, lass mich erst übersetzen. Also, Rabbi Weismann sagt, das Gute ist, dass die guten Taten, die jetzt vollbracht werden, am Ende belohnt werden, aber genauso werden auch die schlechten Taten, also die ganzen Schweinereien, die jetzt begangen werden, am Ende Konsequenzen haben. Also es wird sozusagen von Gott abgerechnet werden. Nichts wird ungesühnt bleiben und nichts wird unbelohnt bleiben. Okay, Wolfgang, du wolltest was sagen.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Das Wolfgang eben.
Ich finde es unheimlich spannend, dazu zu hören, weil da deckt sich das, was man theologisch jetzt, wie man die Welt sieht, deckt sich mit dem, was man eigentlich aus der Biologie weiß. Denn in der Biologie ist es so, dass das ja rekursive Prozesse sind, dass es immer ein Feedback gibt. Wenn irgendetwas passiert, dann führt es dazu, dass es irgendwo anders wahrgenommen wird und dass alles andere darauf reagiert. Und wenn wir das sehen, wenn wir erleben, dass wir jetzt plötzlich da Menschen haben, die so viel Einfluss haben und so viel Macht haben, dass sie so viel Böses tun können auf die Menschen, dann hat das ja seine Ursache. Dann hat das seine Ursache auch darin, dass wir die ganzen Jahre die anderen Menschen einfach nicht aufgepasst haben. Wir haben einfach das zugelassen, dass diese Dinge über zig Jahre geplant werden konnten. Wir haben das beiseite geschoben. Wir haben Demokratie nicht ernst genommen, sondern haben uns unsere Stimme abgegeben und haben sie machen lassen. Und ganz wenige Menschen haben sich dafür interessiert, was da wirklich passierte. Von daher ist das eine Möglichkeit und eine Chance jetzt auch, dass die Menschen aufwachen, damit sowas nicht nochmal passiert. Wir haben sowas ja schon mal erlebt nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg. Da hat es auch eine Art Erwachen gegeben. Da hat es dazu geführt, dass wir in Deutschland 70 Jahre lang immerhin friedlich miteinander gelebt haben. Aber ich glaube, dass wir jetzt noch viel mehr lernen müssen. Und ich finde es ganz wichtig, dass wir auch uns Gedanken machen, wie wir unsere Gesellschaft möglicherweise neu organisieren müssen, wie wir sie transparenter machen müssen, wie wir sie so gestalten müssen, dass die Menschen rechtzeitig merken, wenn was aus dem Ruder läuft. Wir haben es jetzt nicht gemerkt. Das ist alles viel zu groß. Irgendwo in Davos, irgendwo in New York, irgendwo woanders in der Welt treffen sich Leute, die wir überhaupt nicht im Blick haben. Wir sind angewiesen auf die Medien. Und trotzdem haben die so viel Macht, dass sie plötzlich die ganze Welt verändern können. Da ist was falsch. Das heißt, wir müssen die Politik, wir müssen unser Zusammenleben so organisieren, vielleicht kleinräumiger organisieren und uns dann vernetzen, damit da, wo Menschen Entscheidungsmacht haben, diese Macht nicht missbraucht werden kann. Jetzt haben wir so viel Macht überantwortet an große Organisationen, dass sie missbraucht werden kann, ohne dass wir es rechtzeitig merken. Da ist was falsch. Dieses ganze System, wie sich unsere Gesellschaft organisiert hat, die führt dazu, dass solche Dinge passieren. Und das ist eine Riesenchance, die wir für die Zukunft nutzen müssen.
Rabbi Weisman, Dr. Wodak, you may know that he was the one who was more or less responsible for stopping the last attempt at an international pandemic. That was the swine flu, because he was then in a position of political power. He was a member of the German Parliament, and he was also a member of the Council of Europe. And he's saying he loves to listen to what you're saying because all of a sudden he sees the parallels between theology and biology. And he also points out that we have probably been too, what's the word? Maybe complacent is a good word. Too complacent over the past decades or so, because if we had been more careful, we would have known, we would have seen what was going on, that evil things are happening. He says that there was an awakening after World War II. Many people learned some things, some didn't, but as a result, there was 70 years of peace at least here in Europe, after World War II. This time, he says, we're going to have to learn much more, and we will probably have to reorganize our societies in a dramatic way, maybe organize ourselves in regional ways so that instead of the top-down governments that we're now seeing, which are not even governments, top-down rules from, well, private enterprises like the WHO, like the World Economic Forum, that we get rid of these binding and oppressive regulations and find our own regional regulations amongst ourselves and then connect with each other, which he thinks this is probably part of what you are also alluding to. Of course, on a theological, on a religious level, but he does say that this purely biological approach, which he sees parallels between this and the theological approach, he does think that this is probably directed in the same manner. Would you agree with that, or how do you see this?
Well, there's actually a lot to respond to there, so I'll go point by point in order. First of all, I was not aware that Wolfgang had done that, and I'd never heard of him until today. So I first of all want to thank him for his bravery and his service to the human race when he was in power, from stopping this all these years ago. Second of all, regarding the parallels between now and the Holocaust and what we should have learned, look, people today don't get good history lessons. And unfortunately, when people learn about the Holocaust, they only learn about what happened after the final solution, right? When the people are being burned in ovens and gas in the chambers, they learn about the horrors of the Holocaust. But that's not the education that they really need to focus on. They need to focus on what happened before the final solution. When Hitler took power in the early 1930s, it took him several years to consolidate his power and to condition enough of the people to make the final solution possible. That's the time in which we're living today. We have to nip this in the bud. We have to cut it off at the very roots, because once they implement the final solution, we're basically powerless to stop it. So that's the education that people should have been getting, and for the most part have not been getting. And we also have to recognize that even those who did learn their lessons from history, the bad guys also learned their lessons from the Holocaust. They learned what worked well, what didn't work so well. And during these 70 years of peace that we basically enjoyed, for the most part, they've been fine-tuning their methods and they've been planning their next battle. The Holocaust never really ended. There was just a ceasefire. The bad guys were still out there, and they are perpetuating their evils as well. And they've been doing this constantly. They haven't taken any time off. Regarding the final point, yes, it's true. We should not be counting on the government to run our lives for us. That is not the role of government in Judaism. The role of government in Judaism is basically to maintain basic law and order. That's it. It's not the government's job to decide what drugs or foods we put in our body. In fact, the Rambam, Maimonides, who was one of the great Jewish rabbis, sages in all of history, and of course he was the top doctor of his time as well. His writings are still studied to this day. He lived almost 1,000 years ago, and his name is still known throughout the world. He begins his massive corpus on Jewish law with health advice, because he says if a person doesn't have a healthy body, then he won't have a healthy mind, and he won't have a healthy soul, and he won't be able, therefore, to serve God fully. So before one learns about the Jewish laws and how to serve Hashem, he has to first learn how to take care of his health. And all of the Rambam's tips are about eating a healthy diet, sleeping properly, doing things that all of us basically know today and take for granted. That's what the Rambam says. He outlines basic rules of having a healthy, balanced diet and proper sleeping. And then he says at the end of that chapter, he guarantees, he writes this in his book on Jewish law, he guarantees that if people follow his health-oriented approach, which is not based on putting chemicals or drugs in one's body, but simply living a healthy lifestyle, he guarantees that one will never need to go to a doctor. So he was essentially putting himself out of business because he himself was a doctor. But he was concerned about keeping people healthy. The doctors today are only concerned about keeping people sick and needing their services and making money. If people didn't get sick so much and people didn't need to go to doctors all the time, the doctors wouldn't be able to make any money, and the drug companies wouldn't be able to make any money. So they need us to live. They don't make money off dead people, but they need us to always be putting drugs in our body, being afraid of illness, having chronic illnesses, taking a drug every time we don't feel well or in a bad mood. We need to take drugs all the time. That's the modern view of science, that we need chemicals in our body all the time. The Rambam would say, no, people should live a healthy lifestyle, sleep right, eat right, trust in God, don't have fear, because fear makes people sick, and then we'll basically be healthy. So the government should not be in charge of any of this.
How do you spell his name?
Maimonides.
Okay.
Moshe, the son of Maimon.
Viviana is pointing, she's trying to find some common ground for all of us, apart from religion, and maybe on top of religion. She's saying what this basically means, what you're saying and what she's saying, is that we have to do good things. We have to do, you can call it either follow the rule of law or follow ethical and moral rules, or follow God. It doesn't probably make much of a difference as long as we're doing good things. As long as we remember, for example, the oath of office that many of us have sworn to do good things for the people and not for the industry, for the tech or pharmaceutical industry. Would you agree with that?
Well, look, I would love to find common ground, and I think in principle we do agree. However, when it comes to doing good things and taking God out of the equation, that's not really possible, because everything that the bad people, all the bad things that are being done today are being framed as good things. They're trying to save lives. They're trying to protect people. They're doing it for the greater good. The greatest evils in history have been done for the greater good. No tyrant has ever come along and said, I am an evil tyrant. I'm going to murder people because I'm a bad person. They always frame it as being a good thing for the greater good. So if we're going to be left to our own devices to decide what is good and what isn't good, that guarantees that evil people are going eventually to take power and do evil things. And they're going to call it a good thing. If we don't have an objective frame of reference, God creating the world and God writing the instruction manual for the world and telling us this is good and this is not good, then the only other option is eventually evil.
Yeah, but in Germany, for instance, our basic law is not focused around like the common good, because we have the dignity of the individual as a result of, what happened during the Holocaust. This is what our constitution is based around, and that I think is like a strong, you can still pervert it, but I think if we all go back to this sort of these moral grounds, this ethical idea of like the individual being, like that you just cannot kill the dignity of the individual. I think that's in a sort of more. It's a similar. It has aspects of what you say, because it's also. Then you can say it's a God-given dignity, whatever. But or you say it's like in the individual himself. I think it's the, it's just looking at it from another point of view,
Well, look, I only wish that it were true, because Israel also has that in its basic laws, dignity of every person. But and Israel is doing all of these things. They're saying, well, of course you have dignity, so stay home for the rest of your life if you don't plan on getting vaccinated, because you're a threat to the public. So keep your dignity, but stay out of public life. That's how they're trying to rationalize and twist it.
That's not a true dignity, that's a perverted way to look at it.
Yeah, but he's saying, but he's saying you can pervert anything except.
You can pervert anything.
Kind of thing,
yeah, unless, and that's because if you take God out of the equation, as you said, or maybe spirituality, because our colleague Michael Swinwood from Canada, he's the one who's about to file the new class action for children. He used to be a very successful, powerful attorney, a business lawyer, basically. And then 20 years ago, he decided, this is it. I'm not going to have anything to do with this anymore. And then he started to work only for the natives in Canada, the natives in the United States, and in South America, and turned to spiritualism. And he comes up with the very same or very similar conclusions as you do. I think it makes no difference if you call it spirituality or religion. If you do take God or spirituality out of the equation, you're probably lost. I tend to agree with that, because it becomes clearer by the moment that laws alone and rules alone will not be the solution. We need more than this, and therefore I tend to agree with you.
But just one thing, because what we see here from the churches in Germany, like the Protestant and Catholic Church, maybe they have taken God out of the equation themselves, because
look, I've been fighting the rabbis in Israel. Any rabbi who's getting a paycheck from the government, which is most of them, they work for a hospital or they work for an institution that is at some point funded by the government. They're all twisting the Torah around to take away human rights and say people must get vaccinated. There is no such Torah. That's not part of Judaism. But most people don't know enough to be able to challenge them, or they're afraid when they see this prominent rabbi with a long beard saying, this is what you have to do, this is what the Torah says. They are intimidated by that. religion can be twisted around by people that are looking to do that. But people who know a little bit, you don't have to be a genius or a medical expert to know that the government is lying to you and the drug companies are lying to you. And you don't need to be a great Torah sage to know that people are twisting the words of the Torah around either. People need to have basic knowledge and to think for themselves. And that's the one thing the government doesn't want anybody to do, is to think for themselves.
There's one thing that I wanted to mention, because we've heard this a number of times now. Some of the people who got vaccinated, I've heard this from witnesses who reported this to us. They explained that they were completely shocked after the vaccination, saying, "God has left my body." Does that make any sense to you?
I actually never heard that. Have you heard that? Have you heard that from people in Israel, or just
in the United States? We got it from a whistleblower in the United States. Yeah.
Wow. I never heard that. I don't know what it feels like to have God inside my body, but I certainly wouldn't want God not to be inside me. I don't know. It could be that if this is a form of idol worship, and I really believe it is on some level, then when a person kneels before an idol, he is pushing God away. Now, a person has to repent and recognize God. There's always that opportunity for people to repent and bring God closer to them again. But I do believe that those who are putting their trust in science and needles and the media and the government are de facto taking their trust away from God, and they are pushing God away. Look, the Torah says God watches over fools. That doesn't mean that we should do foolish things. It means that we all have an angel watching over us. When we cross the street, a car won't hit us. When we engage in normal human behavior, terrible things won't happen to us. But if we're going to take a poisonous drug and put it in our bodies, we can't blame the angel when something goes wrong with it. We are actively harming ourselves or actively pushing God away from us.
Okay, so don't take God out of the equation. That's the conclusion that we have to draw from this. There's probably several different ways of translating this, but I get the message. If you forget about spirituality, if you forget about God, you're lost. That's the basic message, right?
Well, look, everybody has a God. Either they have a God with a capital G or they have a God with a lowercase g. Everybody is serving something. The only truly free person the Torah teaches us is one who is serving God with the capital G. That makes a person truly free. He has a free mind, a free soul, and he's not a slave to something else. That's the only true freedom in the world, is to serve God with the capital G. But everybody is going to be serving something ultimately.
Did you ever realize that there's that the word God and good are somehow related?
I never made that connection personally.
I just realized that. Probably in most languages too.
Well, look, God is the source of all goodness. That's not one of his. I mean, God is the source of everything, but God is all loving and all good, and he only wants what's best for us. God is not an angry God that we have to give our children over and kill our children so this angry God will be appeased. Yeah. That's not a death cult. God loves life. He loves people. He loves the entire world. God made the world, and of course he loves it. So God only wants good things to happen.
I think that's a good closing word. I really enjoyed talking to you, Rabbi Weissman.
Thank you. Likewise. It was really nice meeting all of you. Thank you for having me on your program.
Thank you for taking the time. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Take care and have a great weekend.
You too. God bless you all.
Thank you very much.